Here we go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Real Siblings. It Ain't Easy. I'm Eric Seaman, realtor with Keller Williams Heritage in San Antonio, Texas, and I am here with my sister.
I'm Donna Reed. I'm with Keller Williams, Southern Arizona.
This is not your typical real estate podcast, and we are not your run-of-the-mill hosts. Where you live, how you live, and what type of property you call home reflects your life, livelihood, and lifestyle. Donna and I work hard to blend lifestyle together with real estate to entertain and inform our listeners. Together, we grew up in Lindsay, Ohio from the late 1950s through the 1970s. In the 1980s, Donna, now married, returned to raise her family. The combination of our idyllic lifestyle together with memorable homes irrevocably impacted our lives and careers in real estate in the Southwest states where we now reside. We have recognized that the properties are only a portion of that equation and that the balance is comprised of our life and upbringing in that farming town. We hope we will be successful in providing you expert knowledge of our markets while we share some history, statistics, and simply information about the real estate market and industry. So that's the rework. Donna.
Eric, I'm laughing so much because I'm looking at my desk. And I put our little outro thing over between the microphone and the back of the computer, and I can see you looking up. And someday maybe we'll just have really cool studios, and this will all be handled. But
this will be much easier with the scripting, and
it just amuses me.
Okay, so what are we talking about today? Beautiful flowers, right? This is our lifestyle home and gardening segment.
That's right, the home and garden section. So. You know, Eric, you made the comment that as we've evolved into this year, we realize how much we talk about lifestyle and maybe less about houses and real estate. And so each of us today have a backdrop that is reflective of spring in our area. And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, or if you're just listening, I have a picture behind me of Picacho Peak. Picacho Peak is about an hour north of where I live, maybe 40 minutes, and it's on the way to Phoenix. It's a super popular area for hikers. And this year, so the picture behind me shows, first of all, saguaro cactus and a couple of Palo Verde and stuff, but the blooming poppies. So we have a ton of yellow poppies. And then we also have some of the lupine, the purple, which aren't showing in this particular photo. But we have had so much rain and actually snow on the mountains this year. So the runoff is tremendous, which means we have beautiful spring flowers.
Right. So since you've got the mountain in behind you, you could sing it, right? Because the hills
are alive with the sound of music. The hills are alive.
There you go. Thank you.
I already sang this morning at BNI at 7:00. So What's interesting to me is just like, you know, you go through Facebook and when we get snow, there's a million pictures of desert snow. Even when we get a good storm, we take pictures of the rain. So now I literally have a friend who she and her husband went hiking. They go, well, we are one of the many hundreds or thousands that came from Tucson to come see the poppies and the flowers bloom at Picacho Peak. Like, just acknowledge it. We're all just super excited to see spring flowers. And ironically, I'm thinking about what I'm wearing. So this might not seem like anything to you depending on where you live. I still am wearing long sleeve shirts and pants and shoes and socks as compared to sandals and t-shirts. And it's almost the end of March. And I know, Eric, you're always warm, so I'm sure you'd be fine. But for me, I know you're
I'm red-faced sitting here in my studio.
Yeah, you are. It's been a cold year for us. And so today I left with a long sleeve coat on. And when I was in college here back in the 70s, I remember laying on the roof of the dorm in February to start getting tan, which was so super healthy for us. But
you were working on vitamin D. It wasn't about your tan.
Right. It had nothing to do with the tan.
Vitamin D levels.
The baby oil and all of that random stuff that we did that we shouldn't have done. So anyway, today was a beautiful day. We had beautiful white clouds in a beautiful blue sky. It was a little bit chilly, but it was lovely. And people are starting to sit outside, for the eating. For a while, we were all inside because we're all wimps. But what do you have behind you? I know that's your house. I can see it blurred in the background.
That is my front yard. Actually, just a couple of hours ago, it is bluebonnet season. Actually, it's Texas wildflower season, and thank you to Lady Bird Johnson, LBJ's wife, for protecting this time, this frame. You can't cut along the roadsides. Everything remains in bloom until it has a chance to seed. And I have been working for years to encourage, develop, and grow my bluebonnet patch. So that is just outside my windows. Actually, my head is probably blocking the window that is providing light on the side of my head.
Really? Okay. No. So when you lean a certain way, I can see the Route 66 sign behind you because of being a virtual thing. But yeah, are those the front windows to the house? Those are the
that's right out front. That's 6 foot from the front door. And I got down at ground level. And of course, in addition to the bluebonnet, there is an Indian paintbrush. That's the orange that's there. But that just brings us around to, you know what? Let's go back, fly back to Ohio. And what did we look at, and what were the spring flowers in Ohio?
Yeah. And I think that they've already had some blooms because they got really warm this year and everything. So we would have tulips, and you mentioned crocus, lily of the valley, peonies. People are starting to talk about and I'm seeing the spring peonies.
And the daffodils and forsythia were the other two, because both of the houses that we lived in, the Main Street and the Lynn Street house, of course, the Main Street house has that huge one that was, I don't know if you still did it, but I was a kid and we crawled underneath it and built forts in the branches underneath.
A forsythia?
Yes.
Where on Main Street?
At the back, right at the alley.
Oh, at the alley. Yep. Okay. You're right. I had forgotten about that, but I wasn't crawling under bushes probably.
Yeah, that's right. I was crawling under bushes because I was.
And here we buy artificial forsythia to put in our arrangements, at spring. What's the other one that I'm trying to think of that was always on the altar at Easter, and like purples and pinks, and it smelled so good. Okay. Somebody from Lindsay has to watch this.
Yeah. Are you talking like from the lilacs aren't blooming yet, are they? It's still a little bit early for lilacs.
Well, lilacs would be closer. Remember, I carried them in my wedding on May 24th, and we had to hold them a little bit, but no. Oh my gosh. Okay. You guys, they get all like, they get shaped like this, and they come up, and they comes in purples and pinks, and it's going to make me nuts, and I can't think of what flower this is.
I love the fact that we want people to listen to this on a podcast platform, and you're going, they look like this. And it looks like you're stretching pasta or something in your...
I can't help myself. Anyway, so we had a lot of different spring flowers back in Ohio, and I love seeing when the others post, what they have and what's happening. And then it rolled into Easter, and we know that Easter is different months, right? It changes every year. So the flowers may or may not have been different, but you and I talked a whole lot about what Easter meant to us as kids, and how those days looked. So why don't you tell folks kind of what Easter was like for us when we were younger?
So since we were right across the street from our church, Trinity United Methodist Church, and Easter sunrise service, I think I recall 6:15, right? 6:15.
You got me.
And it was the Youth Fellowship, or YF, which ran that program.
Right.
So we do a 45-minute Easter sunrise, some sort of a little play in addition to your normal Easter hymns, one or two. And of course, they probably are repeated at the main service at 10:30. But we would get up, we'd be up early in the morning over for that. And then because Dan and then Ken and then I all ran the local Toledo Blade newspaper route, we would deliver Sunday newspapers, and they were big. And we deliver newspapers while the rest of the youth fellowship, immediately following the meeting, would go over to the workers' home. Workers' home would then become the breakfast morning brunch spot, courtesy of the youth fellowship. We would finish newspapers, show up sometime just in time to do all the dishes and eat some kind of lukewarm scrambled eggs and some
bacon if we were lucky.
Right. And then when we were done with that, we'd get a chance to go do a quick hunt for Easter
Oh,
eggs.
Easter eggs. Yep. Then we would hunt.
And then we had to change and get ready for church. And it
Yeah.
was Sunday school at 9:30 and church at 10:30.
Yeah. So you guys, in addition to the fact that these things were happening, Eric and I were talking about the fact that we would fold down the tailgate of the car, of the station wagon.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And Dan and I would sit on the tailgate, and the newspapers that had been stuffed were behind us. But even Eric and Ken, who are a little younger, sometimes were in there feeding us papers, riding along. And Dad would drive the route, and we would go to certain houses and, put these great big old thick Sunday papers in, which we always knew on Sunday too. It was a bunch of ads, right? There were so many ads.
And that's when you just said stuffing. While we took those first 4 that we would run to, Dad would finish stuffing the rest of the comic section and all the advertisements into the rest of the newspaper, and then we'd go deliver. But the fact that it was 2 teens on a tailgate on a moving vehicle with 2 kids who were not in car seats, climbing over the seats into the back end, pushing newspapers. There is no way that a police officer in today's day and age would not be pulling that vehicle over very quickly to discuss with them their safety violations.
Exactly. It's funny to think about. And you guys, I have a bone in contention with my older brother here, who actually told me to say a couple things today, but first I'm going to do a dig. So I always tease Dan. Dan's been the money manager for the family for years. And I always say it started with the newspapers, because I would get up, I'd have to get all dirty. I'd have to go do all the work, but it was Dan's route, and Dan would get like 75 cents of every dollar, and I got a quarter. And I don't think I'm ever going to let him live that down. I've probably been in therapy related to that. Whatever. That was the beginning of Dan's entrepreneurship and all of his money that he made.
In addition to the lawn mowing and everything else that he did.
Yeah.
Dan was very focused on, but you were too. What was the other thing that started with Easter? You started making handmade chocolates.
That's true. I did. And when we got into junior high and high school, and I had decided to come to Up With People, I was selling Easter candy to, honestly, I remember the principals, Mr. Buttorf and Dave Brickner, and people at the high school that bought Easter candy from me when their kids were little, which is just weird to recall those names. And
some of those kids that had that candy were in school with me because of our age difference.
Yeah, enough younger. So you're right. I was making candy through high school and decorating sometimes an Easter bunny cake and some things like that. So yeah, which, by the way, probably my whole big cake that sold for $5.50 is what you pay for a slice now, right?
Yeah, right.
So someplace or whatever. So that was kind of Easter in Ohio. Oh, and
and what do you do? Does your church, St. Mark's, do a sunrise service?
We do. And, I have to say that I haven't been to a lot of them. When we came, Caleb was 8th grade or 9th grade, and I did some, but not a ton. And
you had to wipe the sleep out of your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Is that what you were doing? I was like, what are you doing? So what's interesting here, and again, this goes to weather and desert living. Our church is just about a mile from me, and it's up on a corner. There's a huge labyrinth, and we have an outdoor sanctuary, and we have a memorial garden, which is where some of Gil's ashes are. And so there's electric outside. So the sunrise service would be outside, and it faces east, and we would watch the sunrise outside. And it's beautiful. It's lovely. It can be chilly, and sometimes the guitar players are like, it's too cold for my fingers, but typically it's not. And it's a lovely way to start Easter. And then the same thing, then we would, have 2 or 3 services, and the kids do a breakfast and all that. The biggest difference is I'm not delivering newspapers That's
right. That's a guy on the street corner now if there's a Sunday newspaper guy, right?
Yeah, there may be 20-year-olds listening to this who've never read a newspaper. So
what's a newspaper?
I know. So what about you? What do you guys do on Easter morning?
It has been, we don't normally go to the early service just because our drive time.
Yeah.
For us to be the sunrise service, we're up earlier than we would be on a work day. But I think this year the church is having one. And so we're planning on now it's not anywhere near as early. It's 7:00, but
Yeah.
7 o'clock sunrise service, and then we're going to stay and help out at some of the other services. So that's
Nice. Nice.
and then maybe we'll pick mom up and I'll see if I can't get us out to brunch somewhere.
So, the other, and so just for those of you listening, he says mom, this is his wife's mom. She's lives near them in San
That's
Antonio.
right. Good point.
Yeah. So the other thing we got to talking about was what did we eat on Easter? And this became a whole chat, you guys, with our siblings. And
Ken chimed in. We need to acknowledge that Ken chimed in because he's been kind of silent in all of this.
Ken and Dan even, and it's so you guys, our table and this maybe goes to how we live nowadays. So the house in Lindsay that was built in 1868, we had 2 restaurant tables that were side by side that were
Dad got them at a bargain at some point when they were doing the auction house uptown.
Yep. And so those were pushed against the wall by the kitchen window. And every time we would all eat, all 6 of us, we would pull that out. Now it's possible on Easter we were in the dining room, but for the most part, we ate there. And we all had jobs, somebody had to do the dishes, somebody had to sweep the floor. Ken took freaking forever to eat. I will never let that boy live it down. The rest of us were ready. Like, come on, Ken just ate so slow. But we were talking about who sat in what chair. And so I had to call Dan, and Dan says to me, he goes, I sat at the end by the wall. Opposite mom, down at the end by where you could go into the mud room. And he goes, and you were to my right. And you know how I know you were to my right? I said, how? He goes, because your grubby little fingers was always trying to taste something on my plate. And I was like, my grubby little fingers? And okay, real truth, you guys, I always wanted to taste everybody else's stuff, and it made Dan really mad. But that we were all talking about who sat where, and did we have assigned seats? And this has been a Lenten study for my book club here this time, is about who's gathered around the table and having assigned seats, and who comes to a place if you're the first one at a table. How do you choose your spot? Or do you wait to see if somebody else is there? So we kind of all had assigned seats, assuming we were all home. And it took forever to clean up because of Ken. So yeah, Ken, I'm calling you out big time on this. And
I always sat then between you and mom.
Yes.
Because I think the youngest.
Yeah.
Mom kept me closest, and that just was my seat.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, I've been single for a long time. The kids haven't lived here for a long time. So there's not the tradition associated that we had when we were little. And I'm sure that anybody listening to this understands that, right? When you have children, there's a routine, you follow something, you do something. And then one day it's a little different, right? The kids aren't there, and you don't need to have an Easter egg hunt or something like that. Eric,
we wanted to hang on to that Easter egg hunt for a long time.
Yeah.
There is a picture, mom and dad as the Easter bunny.
Who has it?
I think I got to find it. So it was one of those, you were gone at that point, but mom had the big Easter basket, and she was in the dining room. So she's holding it. She's making the buck teeth, and dad jumped behind her in one of his red flannel shirts, kind of slipped it up over his arm to make rabbit ears as mom and dad being the Easter bunny. I will have to see if I can find that. I think it's mine.
All right. So we talked about, where we sat, and then what did we eat? So I don't know what you all that are listening eat, or if there's traditions again in different parts of the country, right? Because we had talked at New Year's about tamales.
But one of the things that was not the case there, regardless of what we ate at the time, Easter brunch was not the business that it has become. Lunch for us, if somebody went out to lunch, it was old Zims. Right?
Zims. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And if and so at our house, we talked about, we think it was ham, and dad would make scalloped potatoes. He had one of those old, and here I am again, motioning you guys, peeling the potatoes by cranking the thing. And then we talked about lamb, and we would have lamb sometimes with mint sauce, which was,
was a sauce, not jelly. When the first time I had lamb and they tried to give me jelly, it's like, no, that's not right. It's supposed to be a sauce. Yeah.
A sauce. So
and I don't even know if you can find it. It has to be an Amazon thing at this point, because I know it's never on the shelves at my grocery stores.
Well, so do you think that that was a Scandinavian thing coming from mom's family, the Swedish side of things?
I have no idea.
Because it wasn't,
That's
well,
the only thing we use the mint sauce for.
yeah, once a year we would do that. And now that I've been here and I eat so much more Greek food and I think how they prepare lamb, it's entirely different seasonings and spices and stuff. And then, knowing mom, we might have had corn or whatever, but is there any specific like spring or do you guys anything different in San Antonio?
No, not really. I mean, right now, getting through Easter, it's the candy frenzy. And like so many other businesses, small businesses that have grown, there's a lot of opportunity for like what you used to do for your own homemade chocolate. And only people now are making cordials and you can get it delivered and you can get dozens of this. And
Wow.
It really has flourished. So you don't just have to go out and get one of 100 different varieties or shapes of a Reese's peanut butter cup or, I mean, robin's eggs. And I got to thinking while I was walking the dogs going jelly beans. I always went for the chocolate ones. They didn't have flavored jelly beans at that point. You had licorice. I said chocolate, licorice.
Oh yeah, me too.
Always went for the black and had the licorice jelly beans and skipped everything else. And they kind of fell through the Easter grass. And it's like, no, it's so sad they got lost. No.
That's funny because I like the licorice too. And I think mom liked licorice, but I don't know if Ken and Dan did or whatever. That's
oh, no, they're going to have to let us know. Okay. We are moving ahead on time. And there are some things that I told you that I wanted to throw at you.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm calling this now architectural forensics or anthropology. Following our episode 18 and 19, where we talked about the 4 houses that we lived in collectively, or you with your family.
Yep.
Having had the conversation with the Sandusky County auditors, I had mentioned that I reached out to the Rutherford B. Hayes Museum. Right. And John Ransom, who's on the museum staff, did some research for me, and he was able to provide me records from 1924, which were called appraisement sheets for Sandusky County. And I don't know how thorough. I mean, obviously we didn't have computers. Obviously things were very, very different in 1924. Did these guys go around and knock on doors and get inside? Because part of that appraisement record actually had a sketch of the house with dimensions. Oh, wow. And listed how many rooms. So they either knocked on the door and someone told them, or they got access or something along those lines. So 1924, surprising stuff, because I'm going to address 107 South Main, the house that mom and dad and you and Dan moved into in 1959. Yeah. Yep. You had indicated in episode 18 that you thought the house was a mid-century, built in 1950. It is on the records in 1924. That's right, because we talked about according to the records, Wilson Fote, who I figure it was his dad, Rufus Fote, was the owner. And on that same appraisement sheet, it says that house was already 42 years old. So, wow, that house was built in 1882, according to that appraisement record from 1924. And in 1924, it had a metal roof. So because I do so much with the historic homes here, I've gotten pretty good at looking at a house and deconstructing it. Yeah. In additions through time. Was surprised that field report, or that appraisement said that it was single, meaning that is a reference to the number of living units, not stories. So there were single, there were duplexes, there were apartments. All those things were listed on this appraisement sheet. So when it said single, it was not 1 story, 2 story. It was an individual, what we call a single family dwelling. Family residence. Okay. It was listed in 1924 as being 2 stories high. It was listed as being 18 feet. It said that there was no attic. Well, however, this is the interesting part I thought here. It had electric lighting in 1924.
That's what happens when you have electricians in the family.
And when the electrician, so I don't know, you'll have to check with Diane Hilt
Well, yeah.
to see what she could tell us about Rufus. And did he start the business that Wilsey took over that then Terry started to run?
I think Denise Rogers is also related in that whole, because Angie Fote, I think they're all related. So Denise might know.
Yeah, for those families that were longer lived in the area. So
Like,
the house at that point was shown as being 10 rooms. 10 rooms in 1924. So the additions were already added to it. What I consider to be the additions. You remember as you looked at the house, the right-hand side towards Mrs. Weaver's had that separate door?
Right.
That, I think, was part of first edition from the original build in 1882. Which would mean, because 1882, they did not have an indoor bathroom.
No.
But by 1924, it did. It was shown as having one bathroom, 2 sinks, and 1 bathtub.
Which is what we had.
Which is what we had. But 1924, a bathtub in 1924, I was kind of blown away on that. Just a couple of others. The house on 120 Walnut Street.
Yep.
Shows as being 36 years old in 1924, which means it was an 1888 build. However, you're off Main Street, right? It had no plumbing and it had no electricity, and lighting was showing as being kerosene lighting.
Oh, wow.
So the difference of a couple of blocks.
Yeah. That was, so power must have just gone down Main Street. That was a Copley family, Mrs. Copley's parents, when we bought it. So
I got the answer to that too. When you bought it, it was the Bowersox house.
Yeah, Bowersox, yeah.
And I was thinking when we were talking about his little appliance fix-it shop, that the sign said Merv's Fix-It Shop. But of course, who did the cars in town that Dad took the car to all the time? Marv Crispin.
Yeah.
Marvin. So I was thinking, no, that can't be right. I must be thinking Crispin's. But as soon as I saw that was Mervyn Bowersox, it's like, yeah, I was right. The little sign right above the side door next to where you park the cars was Merv's Fix-It Shop.
Wow.
All right. So last thing, the Lynn Street house sold originally back in 1870. That was the first documentation I can find. So that's 2 years after we think it was built.
Okay.
But that was a transaction. At some point, there's an undated transaction on the record that shows C.A. Monk to a Philip Overmeyer, and then in 1883 from Philip Overmeyer back to C.A. Monk.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know what was going on there, but I thought the kerosene, the electric power, the bathrooms, and that's all from 1924 sheets, and I'm still digging into it.
So Eric, we know that this isn't going to be near as interesting to other people as it is to us, but maybe those with a family in town, and things like that. But it also brings up when you and I are working in these older parts of town and selling in the cities we live in, we really don't know. I mean, we'll go into a house and I showed one the other day and he said, do you think this was always this way? Depending on the age of the house, I can't even tell you if something from 1980 looks the same as it did, let alone 1880, and what that looked like. And in Tucson, that would have been, what are we, the 48th state or something, so it would have been adobe, it would have been flat roofs, just an entirely different world than what we see now for how we build things. Whereas I think in the Midwest, you think of the wood and the brick and all of that the actual product used for construction
right
would be similar, to what we have used. So yeah,
and it's digging into it. I'm doing a lot more research, that. So
yeah, and
that's it for today.
I know we gotta wrap it up. And you know what? Thanks for those of you that listen to us ramble about this little town that we grew up in and names that you don't know and people that you don't know. And, maybe we'll turn Lindsay into a big old tourist place, Eric, and everybody will want to go through. We can show that picture of the lumber.
Lindsay in Hessville, and Dad can put the play dramatic presentation that Dad envisioned down at the bottom of Roush's Creek or Creek Bend Farm now.
With their chili brand and all them. Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening and joining us as we reflect and recall about how life in Lindsay, Ohio impacted our lives and careers in real estate. It isn't about the houses or just the houses, as you know. Clearly lifestyle, it has to be a blend of the two. And we've carried that forward into our lives and careers as we wrap it up. And it's funny, Eric wrote, or call it a day. And for both of us, it's kind of the end of a day as we're filming this. Keep in mind that our goal is to communicate, educate, and entertain you all and connect with our listeners. So if you're in Arizona, specifically where I am in the Tucson area, I'm available to help you. And Eric is in South Central Texas in the San Antonio area. We are both realtors with Keller Williams, and we're here to help you find a home, a property where you can make lasting memories. And then you can get online and tell us all your stories. Some of you already have that. If you're across the states or around the world, we are both part of a really large network, and we can help you find professional real estate advisors almost anywhere in the world. We're happy to connect you. So remember, it may be simple. It ain't always easy. And until next time, I'm Donna.
And I'm Eric. And we are
real
siblings.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.